So how are y'all holding up right about now as you have been watching us just go ahead and just tear everything down? I know it's probably a little hard to see, especially right now in summer when a lot of these plants are actually going to be doing something. So we'll talk a little bit about that like on another video, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about the Rose of Sharon before I cut this one down. So this right here is Sugar Tip Rose of Sharon from Pruning Winters, and it's a variegated type. This guy right here has already been done blooming. So this is actually a great time to start pruning it down if it needs to be pruned. The most that you want to cut is 1/3 of the plant. We're going to go ahead and just do a little bit higher than, maybe it is 1/3. A little bit probably around here. Because I don't want it to be that small in the new home, in the new garden. But I thought I'd go ahead and share that with you because it's around that time to go ahead and start pruning Rose of Sharons. So yeah, it's probably going to hurt to be doing that. There is 3 of them here. One can actually get this big, but what is so cool about this guy is that these grow up, straight up and not to the side, and they are not reseeders. So I guess we're going to go ahead and get going. We took a little break because it was starting to warm up, but we're going to get going back into the garden.
Okay, so before we continue transplanting the rest of this garden, I did want to stop and talk about this hibiscus right here. Now, this is the perennial summerific perfect storm. Beautiful hibiscus, grew absolutely huge here. It was not done blooming. There was still some buds coming up, and I think we're going to get a couple more flowers from it. But unfortunately, we had to do this prune job because we are moving it. I did want to talk a little bit about it though before I transplanted it. For those of you that are transplanting within your own garden, I left this right here just as an idea to give you because it was pretty big, but this gives you an idea of how big the roots actually are when it comes to transplanting. You want to dig a hole the same size as the roots where you're going to transplant it, and that's why I left it this way, so you guys can actually see how big the roots could actually get out to. So I'm assuming the roots are probably coming out this far, and I know they are because I've seen some of it quite a bit, and they're pretty thick roots. So, but what we're going to do here is we're going to do something a little bit more drastic because we want easy transport. We originally we're not going to take this one. We were going to try to pass it along or whatever the case was, but we decided, you know what, we're going to keep this guy so we can grow it in our next garden. So something more drastic is I'm going to cut closer to the roots because I want to get this into a regular nursery pot in order to transplant this a little bit easier. All right, so very drastic what I had to do, and unfortunately, you know, it's not something I want to do, not something that any gardener wants to do in the garden. But if you're transplanting within your garden, like I said, cut around wide enough to get enough root. As you can see, these roots are very healthy, happy, thick, you know, leader roots, very thick. Look at this piece right here. Love this boggy soil here, absolutely did great. We got quite a bit of fibrous roots that we're going around, but again, transplanting this for the purpose of putting it in a nursery pot with some good potting soil and some biotone is going to do this very good. So maybe prune it down a little bit more. We have a lot of the old stock that's still on there. Prune some of that back and get this transplanted in another container.
Okay, so you got to see Ambrose dig this big boy out of hibiscus, a perennial hibiscus, and now we went ahead and put it in the pot. I'm using, you want to use a good quality potting soil like Espoma Organics, and then we went ahead and put in their biotone, which is root starter. That's what's going to help it a lot start to put on its roots again once, you know, we have a place to put it in the new garden. And that's the whole reason why we went ahead too, and it was going to start flowering, but there's no need for us to leave the flowers because we don't want it to be using any of this energy on that. We want the energy ought to be put into the roots. Now, this is a very tight squeeze, this nursery container we have here. This is not to be left in here for, like, you know, when we arrive there in a season or anything like that. As soon as we get there, we need to find either a bigger container or we need to set it in the ground because this perennial had a lot of big roots. So I feel kind of bad for having it like this, but the plants are very resilient. This plant is a tough one. It'll be okay as long as we bring it out of here. And of course, we have to keep it very well watered. So I'm also going to go ahead and give it another pruning. I'm going to cut it back. It's already, we're at the end of summer, very close to fall. That's when they stop flowering, the temperatures start getting cooler. And then you start seeing everything die off. Like right here, you can see the leaves are already starting to turn yellow, even though it was going to put on some flowering. But we need to make sure to have enough room inside the moving vehicle, the truck. So I'm just going to go ahead and start pruning off a little bit of it. When we arrive there and we start to see the canes die back, turn brown, we can just leave them like that. And then in spring, once again, we go ahead and trim them all the way down once we start seeing the new growth coming up. And that's it. We're going to go ahead and continue taking everything else out. We have another small hibiscus. That's a baby one, maybe 2 years old. That's not that big, but it's going to be fun to see how much roots it's put on.
All right, so this guy right here is Primo Peachberry Ice heuchera. Probably one of my favorite heucheras in the garden. It has a beautiful peachberry color. that glistened, especially when we had teas in Georgia right here. The sun just hit right here. It had a nice glow to it. But this is a beautiful hooker. We have 3 of them here. But so we don't waste any containers and, you know, plant a bunch of these in smaller containers. We're going to go ahead and transplant these an easy way. We're going to plant them up with some other containers we have in the front. Also easily, you know, if you have plants like this somewhere in the garden that you want to use that give you a nice fall color and fall's coming up, you can actually take these, and they're easy to split. Now I split it the wrong way because when I was digging it kind of broke it, but as you can see, these split very easily. You can take some of these and plant them up in other containers to give you a nice fall color, especially when fall's just right around the corner. And like I said, we're going to transplant these in another container, use those to transplant all of the garden, and we might just use these for some fall plantings at our next house as well. But I'm going to continue with these. I'm going to get these planted up in some other containers in the front. Alright, so here's the contrasting difference between a hibiscus that has been in the ground for 4 years, how big those roots, compared to this one that's going on 2 years, maybe about 1.5 years old. The size comparable roots here, much smaller than a 4-year-old hibiscus. Another quick tip also is when you're transplanting plants, and I forgot to mention this earlier, go ahead and water. Not too much water, but give it a good amount of water to loosen that soil. It makes it much easier to dig into and pull these out. And they're already absorbing water. So that's a good good tip right there to do before you transplant. But yep, that's the size difference between newly planted hibiscus and much older hibiscus.